Thank you for having us.
So I've got to start off with this because it's always one of the things that I watch a lot of history, a lot of PBS stuff. My brain needs to calm down by watching the universe, if that makes sense. So when
Mhm.
I'm seeing this, a lot of this makes sense of what's in this movie. People's mental health. Does Can anybody go to space? The answer is not everybody's prepared to go to space mentally. And so I find it fascinating of what this film is about, what you found out being that director and being that astronaut. Not everybody is ready to do this, are they?
Well, I was gonna say, I think we find out different people cope in their own ways, you know? But also that they're really, I think we already do some mitigation mechanisms up on the space station. We're practicing, figuring out, we have Al Holland. It's actually the first guy that I had an interview with when I got to NASA. And he's a wonderful, wonderful person. And so being able to talk to him, talk to his folks while I was up there in space. We talk to them every 2 weeks or so, I think, like that. So they're already thinking about it, but this is then this really big jump that everybody thinks is going to happen like in the future. But these are hard things, and if we don't get ready now, we're not going to be ready. And I really love that Ito has poked that bear.
Oh, absolutely. You don't talk about this. What was most fascinating to you as that person, besides that director, but just as the person in general? Would you go to space? And if you did, are you mentally prepared for what things that could happen?
It's funny. Like it takes a long time to make a movie, so your point of view also has to change while you're making it, right? You have an idea of what the story is and why you're invested in it and what you're trying to say through the story, but you're changing while you're making it because it takes you years to make it. And so if you had asked me that question, a few years back when we started researching it, my answer would just be like yes to everything. Get me on that spaceship to Mars right now. I was actually pitching that to the head of the mission to Mars when I first met him in Marshall Space Center. You're gonna need a filmmaker there. I'm the person to do it. Since then, I've had 2 kids since. My life is different. I'm older. I don't know that I would get on that spacecraft necessarily. I mean, I think the idea, like, yes, I would love to go to space. I would love to go to the moon. I would love to experience it. I would love to film it. Can I be away from my children for 3 years without being able to have one real-time conversations with them? I wish I could say yes, but I don't know that I can. I don't know what it would do to me. It would be really hard.
Well, as that movie whore that I am, I watch every movie that's sent to me. There's been a lot of things on space the last couple of years. And, I've been keeping up with these things because me and my co-host, we've been talking about these things going back to 2016. You know, can couples have sex in space? Are they prepared when there's illnesses and things like that? I'm not going to space. I have no interest. I got a lot of stuff to do on this planet. So for me, I'll be taking care of that. And I'll say, I hope everything's okay. Maybe we can chat. I'd love to do an interview with you, but you can go and I'll stay here. Because going to Mars, that's the long time. And then anything could happen. I've seen way too many movies. But you know what? My hat goes off to all the preparation that goes in. And so, Catherine, that's why I honor you. First of all, being that woman, which shouldn't matter, but also being who you are and getting there. That's a big feat. Talk about that.
Well, I really I love that I had this job. I'm actually retired now, but I think it's a mission you never quite retire from or being a part of. And now I'm a little more. I don't know. The more I'm away from our stories, the more I understand how important our stories are, and that if we don't tell them, then we're not going to have the right mix of people getting on that Mars spacecraft and being successful on Mars. And so, for me, growing up, I was born in 1960, and I never imagined that I would be an astronaut. It just wasn't, I just didn't see people, and I'm the kind of person that needs to see that. I need to see others doing something where I go, oh, maybe I could do that too. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s and I met Sally Ride at MIT talking about her upcoming mission. And I just thought, wow, maybe that could be me. But I really love that Ito is telling this story about not just the sort of what all the nuts and bolts and all the things that have to go right to get to space, but that the people who are going to make the mission work are humans, fragile humans, and they need to take care of themselves and they need to accept some help figuring out how to do that so that they're really part of these things. So I really love being part of this whole adventure in whatever part I can play to be helpful.
Can you talk about the benefits of actually being up there, what that's like, but also returning? Because now we're just starting to see what it's like when you return home. How do you cope on being on planet Earth? Just basically getting out and when you start walking and breathing, what that's like.
Well, we come back, actually, I came back in the shape of my life coming home because we exercise, 5 or 6 or 7 days a week up there to maintain our bone mass. And plus, when an army of people around the earth all know whether you exercised or not, and they exactly know, it is very motivating. So I came back in really, really great shape. So coming home, but one thing that is tough is that your brain has gotten used to flying everywhere and having movement and changing your direction be just effortless, the touch of a finger. And so that takes actually a while for our brain and our head, our vestibular system to figure out where it is again. And most people are throwing up pretty quickly after they get home. But there's, some medicine that helps with that, but it lasts really for, I would say, certainly a week, where every time you bend down to tie your shoes, it's sort of the whole world comes with you. But I think you asked me something at the beginning and I forgot to answer that. No?
Just the thought of being able to the benefits of being up there. What was
Ah,
most fun for you?
um, well, I'm a scientist by
Mhm.
training and I think in my heart. And being someplace where it's a different environment, it shows you can see things, literally see or measure things in a different way. I mean, one of my favorite examples is like combustion. Learning how things burn and how to burn them efficiently and how to use, less, how to be, more sustainable about it. What that involves is understanding combustion better, but it happens so fast. And up there, where the like a candle flame, a flame that we light, those lighter gases are not going up like hot air balloons. They're sticking right around. And so new fuel isn't rushing in. Things that happen in like a millisecond, less than a second down here on Earth happen over 30 or 40 seconds of making measurements that helps you understand what the data is telling you. Because it happens differently. So we have more measurements that we can take over a longer period of time, helps us understand. It's the same thing for, we were talking about maintaining bones. We lose bone about 10 times faster than a woman who's 70 years old and has osteoporosis. And so what she loses in a year, I lose in a month if I do nothing. And so that's sort of bad news. But the good news is that because it's happening so fast, it's actually something we can measure. And it's not over, a year of my life where I'm maybe having different times when I'm ill or not ill or taking different medications. It's a pretty clean medical history. So there's a lot of things that we can discover, everything from how to grow plants and food on the way to Mars helps us grow things here on Earth. I mean, there's just a lot of things because space is different, helps us learn more about life here on Earth.
What was most fascinating for you as that director, as that person who is interested in making this movie? Because I always say it takes an average of 7 years to make a documentary. You've got to raise that money, you got to do this, and you got to have people interested, and then things could go wrong. As I'm here with slow bandwidth at the Atlanta Film Festival,
Oh.
I'm seeing the movie Firefly, on getting their spaceship to go up and the problems that they have. So it's interesting that they're all coming out the last couple of years. Very fascinating. What say you?
I think for me, what was most kind of surprising, like I had all my own sort of like preconceived ideas as to what it might be like to make this thing or talk to astronauts. I think the one thing that as open-minded as you think you are, I assume, oh, I'm about to talk to the superstars of the space program. They're going to be these like, perfect people, this like perfect facade of like, these like heroes, right? Yeah, look at that. Just like, basically wonderful and presentable, but not accessible. And so I was like, just very calculated in my questions. I had all the like really personal questions, which are really the gist of this movie, like tucked into other questions. I was going to work my way in, chip away at the facade, and then boom, hit them with the really hard personal questions. And I really didn't have to do any of that. As soon as I sat down with Katie, And same with Caleb Barron, who's an active astronaut, who you would think has a lot to sort of protect, right? And withhold. It was a completely different story. Not at all what I had in mind. I mean, and Katie and Kayla are very, very different people. And they were both really open right from the get-go. They were like, no need for the nonsense. Like, let's get to the personal stuff. Let's talk about it. I think they knew where I was headed. And they were excited about it. They were excited to talk about the more complicated things, the personal things, the family stuff, the stuff that I don't think they're asked very often. It's for some reason, and it's not, I guess it's not because they don't want to talk about it, but because maybe filmmakers in the past maybe didn't feel comfortable enough asking it, assumed that it would be sort of, too off the record and not actually make it to the film. Wasn't the case at all. And NASA's been pretty great, actually, once we kind of jumped through all the hoops to get the permission to really allow people to tell their story however they wanted to tell it. And so, it's both, Katie, Caleb, but their families too. I mean, Tom Barron and Josh Simpson, Katie's husband, and Jamie, her son. I mean, they just were so open and pretty fragile and talked about some, complicated stuff.
Well, congratulations to this. This is what I call it gets the 4 E's. It's educational, it's engaging, it's exciting to watch, and it's entertaining. And that's a sign of a great film. And with all the, especially with all the hard work goes in. And then Catherine, on your side, I have to call you Catherine. Catherine, on your side, one of the things is it was good to see that from the woman's perspective, because as that drummer in the music world, I could totally identify playing the flute, what that's like for that mom and wanting to still be engaged. That to me is important. Talk about that.
I think you're muted,
And
Katie.
Sorry about that. Um, the sorry, I just was thinking for a minute there. I think back to that duet, and actually, when you hear, it can be it's probably not the best family duet in the whole world, but it was the first one from space. And I think there's this magic of playing music together. And I'm an amateur flute player, but I love to play, and that is transferred to my son Jamie, where he just thinks that you should be able to pick up an instrument and just play it. And I'll find him picking up a whistle and playing something I've never taught him, and finding out that he can play. And so we used to play a lot of duets together because I think that's what music is about. And I like the fact that we did a little of that from space, because I think it helps him remember, like, we still do that. We still have that together, that bridge. And we did a lot of reading of stories. I mean, some of the mechanisms to keep people close might not be so sophisticated, although I think we will need some of the kinds of things that the European Space Agency, you saw some of their things, like Simon, talking to literally a robot. I think we're gonna really, I think those, you have to give those things, they look wild. The husband guy in the virtual reality is a little wild, too wild looking for me, but it's gonna evolve by the time I have to speak with him, I think, on my journey. But those things, they may seem wild, but I think that they're doable. But we read stories together. I mean, I traveled a lot for the training. For a couple of years, I was gone a lot. And it was one way to be really present in a way that you didn't really have to have a conversation and think of what to say, but we could just be together. Was we read Dave Barry's Peter and the Starcatchers. He and Ridley Peterson wrote these series of books that I really love for kids, because it just, smart girls, smart boys, fairy dust, sword fighting, something for everybody.
well, I know we got a couple minutes left, but here's the thing. You made a lot of us music people happy. Congratulations on being the first flute player in space. But also, it is that connection, because as that drummer, I always say us drummers, we bang harder no matter what we drum on. So if I did go to space, I'd have to bring my drumsticks and carefully drum on something to see I'd be the first drummer.
Oh, you'd be so welcome. And I have to say, I'm not the first flute player. There's another one, a friend of mine, Ellen Ochoa, was the very first one to bring her flute. And I didn't bring on mine on my shuttle missions, but when I was going to spend 6 months up there, I brought my flute. I brought an old Irish flute for Matt Malloy of the Chieftains, like 100 years old, this flute on a new space station, and
Wow.
a tin whistle. And then I don't know if you ever saw the duet that I got to do with Ian Anderson. And I just think music is a way to just join us together.
All right, last question for both of you. What do you hope the audience gets out of seeing this movie?
You first.
Um, I hope that they realize that, like, by bringing us to space with him, us meaning the people watching the movie, that means that the Mars mission and all the missions in between now and Mars could become real to people, where they would realize that this is real people fighting so hard to do things that are really difficult, and they're gonna. I hope that they'll be with us on our journey, and maybe some of them realize that they're supposed to be on that journey physically on that spaceship. So I'm hoping to see some of them there. I'll be watching.
I think for me, there's like a kind of a space takeaway and like a non-space takeaway. The non-space takeaway for me is maybe this idea of being kind of open and forgiving to this idea that, you know, we're all going, we're constantly leaving home. We're leaving home because we're going to school, or we need a better job, or we need to leave our home because it's like on fire and we got to run away, and we're leaving family behind. And we make new homes for ourselves. And then it's like, so where do we belong and where's home? And I think this idea that we all live in like daily, I certainly, like, it's part of my life of kind of negotiating these two homes, and my roots and my family, and who have gone on their own journeys, right? And then where I made a home for myself. You know, how do I sort of hold both of these things in my life? I think that's complicated for a lot of people. And I think this story, like, hopefully finds a way to tell it. I think the more space takeaway is that I love, you know, talking to Katie and Kayla, I was like, oh wait, they're, you know, these are like real people doing extraordinary things. And I'm actually quoting Kayla Barron. I mean, they're not like these sort of like macho test pilots. They are people who are really aware of, like, they're going to face adversity, they're going to face conflict, and because they're open to how fragile they can become, they're going to do pretty great in space, I think. And the fact that this is who we're sending out there is it's kind of wonderful. It's like we're sending ourselves out there. We're not sending like some like caricature like version of ourselves. And I think it's kind of amazing, actually.
Well, I get to say to you, Catherine, welcome back home, and you, job well done.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Because
This is great.
you made me think of the Michael Pena character on the first migrant who went to space and 1 million, a million miles away. That's what I think of when people achieve that goal, because it's not easy to do that.
Not at all.
Well,
Totally.
thanks very much.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Brian.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Hey,
Thanks.
thanks a lot. Look forward to seeing
Bye.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, you will.
Okay.
Bye.